So you decided you want to go to polar regions or region if you can only go to one. Doesn't matter if it's Antarctica or the Arctic. The best way, in my opinion, to do it is to do it on an expedition ship. That means that you're going with a company and a ship that has a small number of passengers on it, generally about 200 passengers or less. And there's so many reasons why that's the best way to do it. I've talked about it in some of my other polar region videos. But right now we're going to concentrate on how do you choose the company to go with. There's a lot of different factors to think about and questions to ask yourself. It's like a form of travel. Are you more of a budget traveler? Or are you more of a luxury traveler? And we'll get into all of that here talking about how to choose an expedition company to go with. So I think the hardest part in my experience was dealing with the company once I'd chosen the company I was going with. A little bit of a caveat there. The 3 times I have gone to the polar regions, I did go on a group trip, which means that the influencer hosting the trip had already decided the company that they were going with. So I didn't really get a choice there. But before you think it disqualifies me on having an opinion on which one to choose, I promise you, I have dealt with more nonsense with these companies than you can imagine. And that's because even though the influencer chose the company that we were going with, I still dealt with the company directly through my booking. So it was not like I was hands off. I was very hands on all 3 of these different expeditions, 2 Antarctica, 1 to the Arctic. So I think for me, dealing with the company itself was extremely difficult, and there's a lot of reasons why that is. It's not as simple as, okay, now I booked a company and I think there's, if what I'm dealing with, there's like one person, so to speak, or one point of contact. Absolutely not. These companies have both what I call a ground staff. They have the corporate office, and then they have the team that is on the ship itself. So you book, you have a corporate office. If something goes wrong, that's where your phone calls go into, your emails going. In my experience, they'd have been less than helpful. I could go down that rabbit hole. But a high level overview is I've had issues with getting responses for any questions I've had. I actually am still waiting for a response for an email I sent last November. That was 8 months ago at the time of this recording. I have already gone on that trip, still never gotten a response. They're very, very unresponsive. I've had issues trying to get balances, my remaining balances. I had issues with sorting through rooms, cabin rooms with them, hotels with them, roommates with them. So some of that goes the corporate office, some of that also goes to the ground staff. So when you arrive for your expedition, whether that's in Ushuaia for the Antarctic or if that's in Longyearbyen for the Arctic, there's generally a ground staff there that helps you. They help you with checking into the hotel for your night there in port. They're there to help you get to and from the airport. They're just there to help with any last minute things before you embark on the ship. I had my issues with them as well. Sometimes it's gone very, very smooth. Sometimes it has not. I've had issues where I was in a hotel that was different from the rest of the group. Ended up working out well for me because I was in a better hotel. Still a bit of a letdown because the group was separated. I've had issues with them for placing me in a cabin that was not with someone who was in the group that I was going with, but I had booked with. I had issues with transportation where I was told one thing and ended up not having transportation. And it's just been so many nightmarish stories. So the ground staff is different. And then, of course, you have the team that is on the ship with you. They're the expedition team. And that is the team that is not only the scientists and the experts, they're also the people that help with like hospitality side of things, making sure you're happy and everything's going well. And there, of course, there's a ship staff that does that, but there's the company staff as well. And I had issue with them. I'm sure they're great people, but it was not a good situation, and I still remember that the time it was recording 4 years later. So I think for me, that's the hardest part of doing these expedition companies. They're just a pain in the butt. That's across the board. I think in total I've dealt with at least three, if not four separate companies. Yeah, actually four. I dealt with four separate companies, which will not be named. And they've all been the same. And some are a little bit better than others, but unfortunately, this just has not been great experience. And so, move on from that topic. I think there's just questions maybe that you should ask yourself, not necessarily about the company, but about how you travel, and talk about it a lot. Everybody travels differently. Do you want more of a luxury experience? Do you want more of an all-inclusive experience where maybe you book with a company that charters a plane so you don't have to worry about your flights? Do you want more of a luxury experience with and maybe a newer ship, maybe larger cabins? I never travel luxury, so insert whatever dreams you have of luxury travel there. Maybe for when you choose company, you want a company that offers different sorts of like off-ship experiences. There are ships that do pretty much everyone does kayaking, but there's also ships that do paddleboarding. There's ships that have helicopters. There's ships I've even heard that have submarines now for things you can do. So I think you should ask what kind of experience you want as well. How many logistics do you want to handle? For me personally, I've always handled the flight and accommodation logistics myself. Partly because I've had to, partly because I wanted to. I know for me, I like to arrive early and stay late after, just to give myself a little bit of overtime in case things do go wrong. So, just ask yourself how you want to travel. Do you want to get to a destination early, and so like you're going to Antarctica, and maybe you want to ride early to experience some of Ushuaia, some of Tierra del Fuego, lots of different things that you can do down there. And quick side note, highly recommend doing that before getting on the ship, because once you go back from Antarctica, reality is not the same. You just kind of want to have a little time to get back into that and readjust. So tons of different questions. I would just recommend thinking through your applications and what you want, and then going from there. So the thing that everybody always asks me inevitably is prices, and I will be totally transparent because all this is public information. You can Google these acquisition companies and see what they cost. Prices have gone up over the years. So when I first booked, which was 2022, for my first Antarctic expedition, I booked an interior triple cabin, and that was around $7,500. At the time, there was a fuel crisis, and God bless this wonderful, wonderful expedition company. They did do a fuel surcharge, which was mandatory, so I spent about an extra $500 for their fuel charge. And lesson learned there is be very, very sure to read your contracts closely, because it was an unwelcome surprise. I knew it was possible. I did read the contract, but some people were very surprised. So at the time, that's what the pricing was for Antarctica, and that was 10 days. When I went again in 2025, I booked a more expensive ring so I could be guaranteed a window, and that one ran me at about $12,500, and that was 2025. I booked in 2024 for that, and it wasn't anything, fancy, luxurious. It was a very nice cabin, had a roommate, had a window, great experience. Not gonna knock it, I think. And that was also 14 days. That one went below the Antarctic Circle. Nowadays, based on the pricing that I've seen recently, you're running about the 12,500 mark to go down to Antarctica. And if you want to go down for longer periods of time, like 3 weeks, you're hovering in around $20,000 to $25,000 to do that. So it's not an inexpensive thing by any means, and none of those expeditions included my flights. Flights are obviously going to range depending on where you're departing from, your connections, are you going to fly in points, all that different stuff, which class you're going to fly in. So I won't go into what I spent on flights, because that really is going to vary. The expedition boat builder set prices, and all of those expeditions through Antarctica did include a stay there in Ushuaia for the first night. Now, the Arctic was a little bit different. I will just say, I think it was between $5,000 and $6,000. I really would have to look back. I apologize, I didn't pull that number. Let's just round it up to about $6,000. It was definitely cheaper than going to the Antarctic. However, I booked my own accommodations there on Svalbard and Rongeburn. I booked 2 nights, I think, before I got on the ship, and 2 nights after. I booked there at one of the main hotels right in the city center, and I believe it was about $300 per night. That pretty much is what it is to stay up in Longburn. It's just a very, very expensive place. Svalbard use. It's just expensive. So I think it would hold a waste, and I guess that would be around another $1,200 for the time that I spent there on the island. Again, depends on how you travel. I had a roommate both times, so I was able to split that cost, which was a huge help. But all that to be said, it was definitely very, very expensive. And again, flights, not really gonna go into that because it all depends on how you do it, where you're coming from. I can say off the top of my head, I think it was about $200 to fly from Oslo to Longburn, and that was a one-way flight. Uh, I booked them right when they became available and just make sure I had one. So I'm not sure what a return trip is. But of course, you can look for the flights based on where you're coming from and what's going to work for you. So yeah, polar regions are not inexpensive places to go, and it's not even talking about different gear that you need to bring. I personally am very, very fortunate to have grown up in a place that is cold, so I already have a lot of cold weather gear, and I had, say, like my liner, my insulated liner from previous expeditions to Antarctica that I took with me to the Arctic. So I had stuff. I didn't have to really spend the money. Then depending on where you live, where you're from, the price is going to vary. I would definitely say easily a couple $100 that you're going to spend on gear to make sure that you're warm and dry and safe and rigor for the expedition. So yeah, once again, expeditions to the polar regions are not inexpensive things. And I guess before I get to the bottom line of all this, the last thing I do want to mention is there's something that's really, really funny that happens with expeditions in these companies. They tend to change hands a lot. It's happened to me both times that I have gone all 3 times. Well, no, twice. Let me rephrase that. The first time I went, which is in 2022, I booked with a company, which was the company that Influencer Joe's will work with. Between the time I booked and the time I got on the ship, that company had sold to another company. That was a very frustrating experience and something I hoped never to repeat itself. The second time I went to Antarctica, it was no problem. One company the whole time. I had gone with them previously because they were the company that bought the original one I booked with. So I knew what to expect. And again, I'm not going to name names, but I really enjoyed my time with them. And the time I went to the Arctic, which was only a couple weeks ago, at the time of this reporting, at least it's a couple weeks ago, I booked with a company that the influencer had chosen. And once again, that company sold to a different company. And that transition was not fun. It was extraordinarily frustrating. Frustrating to the point that I will likely never select that company again to travel with, which is unfortunate because they also bought ships, and they're some of the most beautiful, up-to-date ships that are out there right now, which is very, very unfortunate, but fell into demands that are not the best for customer service, we'll say. So it's just something to expect with these companies, as they do change hands frequently. It's frustrating. It's not something to go through or that you want to go through. Just expect it when you get into it. Is what it is. It's part of the experience. I guess I can kind of look back and laugh, but at the time it was not funny. It's actually, no, I'm still not laughing. I digress. All that to say, the bottom line. Some people will ask, like, what makes you lean towards one company versus the other. And I I've gone with influencers, so I've never really had to do my own research. But I think there are things that if I was to do this again on my own without going with an influencer, I would look for in companies. Number one, definitely, what are their qualifications? How long have they been around? Where do they go? What experience do they have? That's a huge thing to look for. I also look for what what the qualifications are of their expedition teams. Do they bring scientists on board? That's something for me that is a huge thing. You're going to these polar regions that are obviously very remote and people are not supposed to be there. And I think it's so important that these companies participate in the science that happens in this polar region. So I always recommend going to companies that have scientists on board. Another thing I look for is the ship. What is the class of the ship? What is the history of the ship? Yeah, very, very important. These ships are your lifeline when you are in the polar regions, and it is very, very important. I cannot stress that enough, that you have a good ship, and that she is going to be everything you need, not only for a comfortable expedition, but also in my case for working sea, which I been adjacent to in 2022, when the Viking Polaris was hit with the roadway. I was also on the Armitage Passage at the time, and that's something that really sticks with you. So you can Google the Viking Polaris on the 22 and try. I promise you, you will very easily find these articles. I think those are kind of the top things I look at. It's not only price and dates. It's easy enough to find the price of your range, your in your budget, and also dates that are you can work with to go. But I think those things and looking at the team, do the other scientists, what is its history, what is the ship, they're very important to me and how you've done it 3 times. I have high expectations, so. Yeah, I think that's kind of my bottom line on that. Hope that was helpful. They're all things I wished I hadn't done when I first did this. And again, I've never had to look at a music company on my own. I've always got what the influences and their choices, but I've learned a lot through it, and it was hands on. And the influence, it wasn't like a one and done influencer transparency. It was also me in the background, making sure everything was all lined up and ready to go. So. Hope that was helpful. I'm super excited to do polar read and stuff. I could just came back from the Arctic and I'm loving reporting these things. So I hope you enjoy it. Subscribe, stick around. Got some more videos coming out, and I'm still working on that polar guide. It will be out. You will get notified. It's going to be really, really awesome. So it'll be full of everything I've learned, everything I wish I knew before all this, and I think it'll be super helpful. So subscribe to the channel, jump on the newsletter, whatever makes you happy, and can't wait for the next one.